Hey guys, this is Ben with Swift English. So before we begin with this next lesson, a dear user had a post in one of the videos. When am I going to get to the TOEFL listening material? I will soon, guys. I'm doing my best, but I'll get there ASAP. So today we're gonna take a look at something related to not just TOEFL listening, but also some questions or tasks from TOEFL speaking, as well as TOEFL writing task 1. So today's lesson is pretty much about note-taking, okay? So we're gonna be discussing symbols, reductions, abbreviations you can use to have an easier time taking notes during the exam. Okay, so let's take a look here. So when it comes to some symbols, reductions, and abbreviations for some common words, and keep in mind, this isn't an exhaustive or extensive list, but these are just some words here. You could have a lot of situations where you could be using all kinds of extra symbols. Okay, so here we have the number 2, which is going to represent TO or TOO or TWO. So all of these are homophones, so 2, right? You could use the number 4 as a symbol for the preposition or the actual number word. You could use ABT, it's one of my favorites for about. You could use B\C, BC, BEC for because. Personally, I'm used to just using BEC out of habit, but you might like BC because it's shorter, or B\C. Whatever works for you guys. You don't even have to use any of these. These are just suggestions, my personal recommendations. So sometimes you could get ultra creative and use like a letter and number in some rare cases, like before, for before. BT is my personal symbol for but I also suggest using this, guys, for transition devices or words that have the same meaning or function. So like however, nevertheless, nonetheless, it's great for these kinds of situations. BTW for between, cont for continue, diff for different, etc for and so on. EX, so similar concept to BT. So when it comes to exemplifying words like transition devices such as for example, you could also apply the same symbol for similar words, synonyms like for instance, to illustrate, even the informal version equivalent like. So be creative with these guys. N is my personal symbol for and. O or backslash for or. Now pause for possibly or possible. So sometimes you could use the same symbol, reduction, abbreviation for different words. Up to you. Prob for probably or probable. So so this is an interesting situation here. So I'm actually gonna use the same exact word. It's just 2 letters, guys. If I put S, it's kind of ambiguous, confusing, vague. But I also use so for similar words or devices, so like the transition words or linking words, therefore, thus, hence, as a result, consequently, as a consequence. So I love to use it for these as well. W slash for with, W slash O for without, a V for very, YR for year, YRS for years. You get the point. You got the idea. Now, what about symbols for situations where you're dealing with negative words or negative language? So what I prefer to do in that situation, because it's really tricky, most of these have apostrophes in them, and that's kind of like difficult to deal with. So what I suggest doing is just use the word X, the letter X, to symbolize these kinds of words. So aren't, can't, couldn't, didn't, or the ordinary negative word not. It's perfect for these kinds of situations. Excuse me. So arrow symbols for certain kinds of concepts. So if you want to say like something's expanding, something's increasing, right? Something's growing perhaps, you could use a upward arrow. Or maybe for situations, scenarios where something's decreasing, it's lowering, it's reducing, it's shrinking, consider using a downward arrow. If something causes something to happen, if something leads to some kind of change, maybe it's a transformation, why not use the forward arrow? It just makes life easier sometimes. I don't really use this one, but you could. It's just an idea. You could use a backward arrow for regress, regression, returned, these kinds of situations. All right, so now I want to go over some tips for more ideas involving abbreviations, symbols, reductions, and so on. Okay, so when you get really good with the note-taking, maybe consider applying these tips as well, these additional tips. So omit the vowels inside a word. So let's say this common word, this academic word animal, you could write it out as ANML. That way, when they repeat it a lot, you're not going to fall behind your notes. And if you want to make it plural, of course, don't panic. Just add an S ending to that word. So animal, or animals here, I should say, becomes ANMLS. That's it. So same thing with book. You could have BK, just remove the double O's. Or if you want to make it a plural form of the same word, just put BKS. Add that S ending at the end. So course, CRS, for the plural form, you could write it as CRSS or even throw in the vowel there. I contradicted myself for just a second, but for the plural situation, it might make it just easier to understand your abbreviation here. Goal becomes GL or goals, okay. Plant becomes plant, and you get it with the plural form. Purpose, PRPS, reason, RSN. And you could make these plural as well, but most of the time I hear them use the singular form, so I just left it as it is here. Okay, so what about some other kinds of words? How should you deal with those? So some of them, it's easier to just refer to the first few letters and that's it. So like with cafeteria, I could just write caf. Just make sure you don't mix it up with something else like caffeine. And you might use caf for caffeine or something else, in a different kind of academic topic. Library becomes lib, predator becomes pred. And again, just like with the previous words I was showing you earlier, you could add an S ending to make them plural, like libs becomes libraries, preds becomes predators, Be flexible. So professor becomes prof, Now this is one situation you want to be a little bit cautious with. Be a little bit vigilant here. So if you're using a really advanced word like this, you could use sit. This is something like natives like me, we're kind of comfortable using. But you want to make sure that during the exam, especially when it comes to TOEFL speaking integrated tasks like task 2, the campus situation, or task 3, the short lecture, and task 4, the long lecture, when you're taking these notes, you want to be able to remember them, recall what they represent. Because if you're reading off your notes and you intended to say situation, but you accidentally said sit instead, or instead of situations, you said sits instead, now you messed up, your speaking performance. So just be really cautious, guys. Do practice these before you use them, before you apply these symbols on the exam. Student becomes stud, or stud, however you want to pronounce that. Studs for the plural form. University becomes uni. You get the idea again. Okay, now here's another scenario that could occur for you. So let's say they're repeating some central idea or concept or topic over and over and over again. So it could be done twice. They might refer to it twice. Or they might mention these words 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6, 7, 8, 9 times. It's possible. So what do you do in these kinds of cases, in these situations? Well, maybe consider focusing on the initial letters of those words, or maybe just think about 1 or 2 letters that can just represent them in general. So like here I have air pollution, so I just transform this into AP. Or here we have this compound noun, blood pressure, we could just say BP, Caterpillar becomes CP. Now, yeah, this was not really a compound noun, but since this is a really long word, I don't want to keep writing caterpillar, caterpillar over and over and over again. I could write caterpie, but if this is a word I'm not really familiar with, and I'm not really familiar with this insect, then, you know, something like CP would be just easier to maybe remember and just write down. Defense mechanism, DM, Einstein. So famous people, they could use them, you know, just put E. Elephant becomes E, firefly becomes FF. So yeah, I repeated the same letter in this one. Guitar becomes G, and Brady, let's say it's a famous writer or scientist, you know, you could write AB. First name and surname, last name, right? Rembrandt, the famous painter, if they are having some kind of discussion or lecture about him, you could write R. Wasp becomes W. Whale becomes WH. So yeah, I feel these are kind of appropriate for this kind of situation. Anyway, guys, if you did like today's clip, just make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit the cowbell for notifications. And I'll see you in the next one.